Hey, what's happening, feelers? This is Tinto and welcome to 2024. Boy, I'm super excited about this year and hope you are too. To kick off the awesome episode, I just need to share a big dream I have for this year, which you are a part of, obviously. I aim to receive 4,000 coffees out of the generosity of your heart to start a new chapter of the podcast that I know you will love. I need you to hold me accountable to the commitment I'm making, so I will share the number of coffees received and count down from 4,000 to 0 regularly so that if we need to put the foot on the gas, we do just that. Now, the good news is the podcast isn't starting 2024 on 0 coffees, and I'd like to give a shout out to everybody that has given so far, starting with you, Iru. I hope I said that right. Thank you for your generous contribution. 3 coffees there, and your comment reads, love the podcast. Then I got my young brother from another mother, Peter AK, got me another 3 solid coffees. And your comment there reads, so many lessons and funny moments too from the pod. Been catching up, always grateful to have been on the first episode. Yeah, brother. And then, this is crazy. Cindy Washe, 30 solid coffees. And your comment there reads, whilst life was lifing, wasn't able to keep up with the podcast, but now that I'm all caught up, it's only right to give thanks for this podcast and its incredible host. Little Man's Midweek jingle is just the cutest. Rah, 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 rah. Thank you so much, Cindy. And then we got VS Jade. Thank you again for your generous contribution. 3 solid coffees. And your comment there reads, cheers to the first 500,000. Yes! As well as the new jingle, way to go. Little Man and the artist/producer. Hey! Pop, 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 pop. Thank you so much. Wish I could give more, but for now, this is a small thank you for being a permanent fixture on my Spotify Wrapped list and for all the major life lessons. Looking forward to celebrating the 1,000,000 mark in due time. Yeah! And the 1,000,000 mark is definitely happening. And then we got Ntando, 5 generous coffees, and your comment there reads, Tinto, it's been weeks, man. Why are you doing this to us? Please, okay, please. Well, I was getting the magic I'm about to present to you ready. Do you know what I'm saying? And then what's poppin'? Hey, I've been dying to say this. Funny enough, you did not leave a comment. Was that deliberate? But in any case, you left 10 solid coffees, and boy, I'm literally speechless. Thank you so much for your generous contribution. 2024 really is a big year for me, guys, and I just want you to share this huge dream with me. And with that out of the way, if you'd like to give to the podcast in a similar manner, please head over to www.buymeacoffee.com/feeling station and give as your spirit leads. Remember, there is nothing too small to support the podcast that you've grown to love. With that out of the way, let's get straight into the first episode of 2024. Is that a breakup?
I think we have a situation right here.
On the Feeling Station.
Hello?
Hi, Tinto.
Hey, what's happening?
Nothing much. How are you?
Doing very well, thanks. And how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for today.
Hey, you're telling me. Welcome to the Feeling Station.
Thank you so much.
For those who are listening to this podcast for the first time, it's a romantic family and friendship breakup podcast showcasing stories that people would like to talk about with a view to give lessons from their experiences. Now, I hope you find today's story entertaining, but more importantly, meaningful. And if you don't know already, the podcast is popular for 2 main reasons. The first being, I do my best to keep you anonymous, my friend. Are you ready for the name that you're going to use for the duration of this episode?
Yes, I am. Hit me with it.
So, I got a message this week from somebody who's recommended the episode to a lot of the Nigerian friends. And apparently I was pronouncing Igbo as Igbo before.
Right.
And they were not happy about that. So I'm going to say it right today, okay? I'm going to refer to the name from Nigeria, and it's in the language called Igbo. And I hope they're happier with that, right? And and your name is Chima. Really simple. Chima. Chima.
Ima, that's beautiful.
Yeah, Chima, yeah. And that means God knows. In my case, I'm like, God knows why you're here.
There's a reason for today's episode.
And what are you calling the guy that you're talking about?
So I'm going to be calling him the good robot.
The good robot, ne? Are they bad robots to start off with?
I don't know, but this one was, you understand kind of why I went with that name.
Yeah. Okay. So
go through.
Okay, so this is The Good Robot. And the second reason why the podcast is really popular is there are real life lessons that people learn from the story that you're going to share today. So what would you like somebody listening to your episode today to walk away with?
So, lesson number one is that yes, opposites attract, but birds of a feather actually flock together.
Yee. Okay.
So, being as compatible with your partner as possible is really important.
Yeah.
The second lesson is medical professionals should date each other. Please.
Say that louder for those in the back, please.
Medical
I like this a lot. Medical professionals should date each other. Okay.
So the third lesson is pay attention to the little details right from the beginning. Habits, character traits, and behavior patterns all reveal a lot about a person's lifestyle.
I don't know what to say, but these lessons are hot. Do you have a fourth one before I get too excited? Or it's just these three?
So I have two more, but they can even be condensed into one. So the next one is never adjust or alter your needs to fit the definition of what someone else wants to give you.
You know, say less. Honestly, I'm genuinely speechless because, let me not say too much. Let me not say too much because I wanted to come towards the end.
Exactly.
But I'll go over them at this point, right?
Yes, please.
Number one, yes, opposites attract, but birds of a feather really flock together. Number two, medical professionals should date each other, period. Yeah?
Yes.
Number three, pay attention to the little details from the beginning. Habits, character traits, and behavior pattern always reveals a lot about someone's lifestyle. And then last but not least, never adjust yourself to meet the needs and definition of what somebody else wants to give you.
That is correct.
Now let's get straight into it. Chima, where did you meet the good robot and why did you decide I want to get connected with the good robot?
So I had moved to this new country for university and, coming from Zimbabwe where like everyone looks like me, I was kind of in this place of experiencing a huge culture shock. Because firstly, I had never had any issues getting male attention, but, in this new country where the white boys would chase after their white counterparts, and then the black men would also be chasing after white women. It was so strange to me that like dating, the dating scene was very difficult to adjust to. So the university that I went to was also in a rural part of the province that I live in. And one day, like my good friend decided like we wanted to go to the nearest city to celebrate her birthday. So we went out for the weekend. And, it was exciting because it was just an opportunity to be able to meet other people, also potentially meet love interests because I went like 2 years without dating or seeing anyone.
2 years,
of the fact, yeah. It was a long dry spell, and I had even started questioning. When you're like, okay, am I even as good looking as I think I am? So anyway, we go to the club, and it was myself, the birthday girl, and another friend of ours that had joined us. And so I had gone to the bathroom, and when I came back from the washroom, there was a gentleman that I noticed was talking to my friend, not the birthday girl.
Yeah, the other one.
So, it looked like he was interested in her, but she was just like not giving him the time of day. So eventually he ended up just leaving her alone. And, I went and found the birthday girl on the dance floor where she was just kind of trying to make the most of her night. So as we're dancing, that same gentleman came and now approached me. So in my head, I was kind of just like, okay, so you saw that you had no luck with my friend. And now, like, you're trying to move to me. I had a few questions, but we started talking, and our conversation was very interesting. In fact, like, we did a lot more talking than we did dancing. Like, we literally just stood on the dance floor and started talking about politics, about religion, about Rwanda and things like that, because at the time, like, I was taking some really interesting, like, sociology and political science courses.
Yeah.
So we just started getting to know each other, and he was like, you know what, listen, I would like to continue this conversation in a more quiet environment. So, why don't we go for breakfast? We'll meet up and we can get to know each other a bit more. So that's how him and I started talking.
So I can ask, is he black, white, Hispanic, Japanese, Chinese?
Yes, he's black.
Oh, he's black?
Yes, from West Africa.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess it's very befitting then that you got an Igbo name, because
it's very befitting.
Because it hails from the West African culture.
Right, and he's not from Nigeria, just to clarify.
No,
but he is
that's why I was quick to say West Africa. For me, potato.
Same thing.
I got somebody I was talking to, and they were really trying to question why I have difficulty understanding the difference between, say, a Ghanaian accent from a Nigerian accent, from a Sierra Leonean accent, and I'm Togo, and I'm just like, yo, I don't know. And they were saying that they have a difficult time discerning difference in accents from Zimbabweans and Malawians and Zambians. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Because for us from the region, it's blatantly obvious what the difference is.
Exactly.
Okay. Exactly. So some man is from West Africa. You guys then connect. Did you have breakfast? What happens next?
Yeah, so we go for breakfast, and the conversation is flowing. He tells me that he's a doctor and he's currently, like, working on specializing, and so that was the path that he was on. And then he knew that I was studying to become an accountant. So how the brain works. I don't know if it's just a thing that women do, but you already start to envision your life with this person. I was already going down the path of, like, oh, this could be amazing. We're going to be this power couple. He's a doctor. I'm going to be an accountant. Like, it's just going to.
I will tell you right now, it's a thing women do. What? You're already envisioning a power couple? You're already envisioning the house, the car, the kids,
all the possibilities. And I was like, wow.
And this is after one meal.
This is after one meal, and a long drunken conversation the night before. So we really did connect, and it sounded like he was, like, a very strong family guy, and family is very important to me. So there were a lot of ways that we genuinely connected. And so after the breakfast, he was like, I'm personally not done getting to know you, and I know that you are leaving today, but can I interest you in staying an extra night, and I'll pay for you to be able to go back to your campus tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So I really liked the intentionality behind how he was treating me, and
It's just only because you mentioned intentionality, and for me, that's a really big thing right now.
Right. Right.
But what did you perceive his intent to be?
I saw it as he was really just trying to get to know more about me, and also to make me comfortable in getting to know him. So that's just all I took from that.
If you don't mind me asking, bearing in mind you had a 2-year dry spell, and this guy now comes knocking on your door, were you willing to give him more attention because it was the first time you had been howled at in 2 years? Or you genuinely found something interesting about him? Because if we're talking about birds of a feather flocking together, right? You, the birthday girl, and the other girl were flocking together. So I'm assuming you think alike. you probably like the same things, you might want to do the same things, but she rejected him. But you're lerping him up. You're slurping him up. So I'm just trying to understand what it is that you. Why are you laughing though?
Because I just wasn't expecting this question, but it's a really good question.
Do you see what I mean? So,
Yes.
what is it that you saw in him that your friend did not see? I guess that's what I'm really asking.
I think, and I find that, like, yes, birds of a feather flock together, but with this particular friend, we weren't that close. So she came along more for the birthday girl, and then her
Right.
and I had like a decent relationship, but we weren't close.
Okay.
So her standards wouldn't typically apply to myself as to what I'm looking for in a guy.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
But
Yeah.
I will say that there probably was influence behind the fact that, like, I hadn't been getting as much attention from men, and so to now see someone who actually is very respectful, who's treating me decently and just being a gentleman, that automatically had my attention.
Looks wise, was he the kind of guy you would typically go for? Looks wise.
No, not at all.
Okay, body wise, physically.
No.
Okay. So at this point, you got somebody who's not physically attractive to you, who doesn't really tick your boxes, but is intentional about getting to know you. And I'm assuming at that point that was enough for you.
That was enough. And I feel I've always been that kind of person anyway when it comes to choosing partners. Like, I don't prioritize their looks. I more so look at other factors when I'm choosing a partner. So this wasn't a surprise to me.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So I stayed for an extra night. I made arrangements with a friend that I knew that lived in the city to stay over at hers. And then we went to dinner together. So he showed up to the dinner in scrubs. And he basically let me know that he was on call that night. So at any point, if his buzzer went off, he would have to leave the dinner.
Right.
And we would have to kind of resume our conversation at a different point. So thankfully, for the duration of the dinner, his buzzer didn't go off. He wasn't called in. We managed to just eat. And then, he left me back at my friend's place. And surely enough, he accompanied me to the bus the next morning, paid for my ticket, and saw me off.
No kiss on the first date?
Not on the first date. Our first kiss was actually at the bus stop.
Oh, yeah. Oh, nice.
So it was just a little peck, nothing too crazy. And I had a long enough bus ride to be able to think about and just fantasize about
Think about the
everything
peck.
on the way back to campus.
I got a little philosophy about pecks. I think pecks are more lethal than a fully fledged deep kiss.
Why is that?
Because they leave you with the sense of curiosity that for the best part you don't know whether you want to act on or you don't.
Right.
Whereas a full-on kiss delivers what you know that, okay, this was good or this was not good.
I'm actually not even a fan of tongue kissing, but anyway, that's a story for another day.
Okay.
So
mine gives you a kiss and you had long enough to think about it.
right. So I go back to campus and him and I continue talking over the phone. And just continue getting to know each other. And I discovered that his family actually had a home in the city that I was going to uni, right? So he would actually come down every 2 weeks just to do some maintenance on the house because they had tenants, and he was kind of the one managing the property since he's the only sibling that's in the province.
Right.
So he would come down every 2 weeks, and that's how we would see each other. And then sometimes I would also go up to the city and visit him.
Was maintaining the property's excuse? Because, bruh, what property requires 2 weeks of maintenance every 2 weeks?
I mean, at this point, he now had an added reason to come into the city, to see this girl.
Sounds to me like instead of maintaining properties, he was trying to maintain a connection here, my lovely. That's what it sounds like. But who's complaining? You weren't complaining, right?
I was not complaining. I was very happy to see him in those 2 weeks. And honestly, this sort of long distance format of the relationship worked very well because I was studying and I wanted to have the time to focus on my school and then get to see him, every 2 weeks. And I'm happy with that. That was enough for me. So this continued until, the point that he then asked me to be his girlfriend. And then we officially started being in a relationship.
I love that about people like him.
Yeah, so he was very intentional from the beginning. And that's something that I'll give to him. So I discovered during our relationship that one of his sisters actually worked on my campus.
Mad.
So it was so crazy because I knew her last name. And so when he told me his last name, I was like, wait a minute, I almost dropped my phone because I was like, are you related to, so-and-so that works in the international student office?
Yeah.
And he confirmed. And it was just crazy because her and I really got along super well. So already this was just a plus because I was like, okay, I have a good relationship with his sister, and he seems to be nice. And then he also then kind of dropped the bomb on me that his parents were coming to visit during that summer. So I would be meeting them.
Why is that a bomb though?
It was a bomb particularly because I had planned to stay on campus and get a campus job for the summer. And he had kind of said, if you're looking for a place to stay, we do have a basement apartment that is unoccupied, so you can stay in that basement. And so we had already made arrangements for me to stay in his family home, so I wouldn't have to pay rent elsewhere.
Nice.
And then he told me that his parents would be coming to visit and they would be staying in the house with me.
Hey, man. That's a real bombshell, Jeez. Talk about getting to know family in close proximity.
You know what I mean?
And how long were they intended to be around for?
They were going to be around for about 4 months.
Mud! Yay. Okay.
So pretty much the whole summer is what it was. And he had already told his parents about me. So there was no shock when kind of he let them know that I would be staying with them. I was the one that was mainly nervous about meeting them. So anyway, I got to meet his mom first, made her dinner, I was trying to do all these things just to impress what would be my future mother-in-law. And her and I hit it off because we're very similar in our personalities. She's a very social person. She loves drinking wine. She loves traveling and just good vibes. So,
out of curiosity, sorry, this is a bit of a sidestep. I'm a huge fan of cooking, and if I can, if I have guests coming over, I try and do something that could be associated with their culture.
Right.
But gotta be very careful because if you get it wrong, they can pick it up real quick.
That's true.
You really mess us up. So cooking for what I'm assuming is a traditional family, and I'm assuming that it traveled from Africa. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
they're based and live in Africa?
Yes.
What was your cuisine of choice?
So I always play on my strengths. I know which recipes I make consistently that come out amazing. And that is exactly what I did. I just made rice, a chicken curry, a nice coleslaw on the side, something that I knew anyone with a good taste buds would actually appreciate.
You made the Mazim dish, my guy. especially around Christmas.
that would come.
Especially around
You know what I
Christmas.
mean?
Because I remember that
meal.
rice and chicken, you know, okay, and well, I guess the main difference here is that yours is a curried chicken, and what we would have whenever we went to Kumusha, which for those who don't know what Kumusha is, whenever we went to the rural areas, it would be your standard rice, fried chicken, like deep fried chicken, coleslaw, because coleslaw for the life of me, especially Zim coleslaw, man, that thing bangs,
telling
right?
you.
Hey, there's nothing like it. Right, coleslaw, and then yours was the curry, but we would have a soup. We'll call it a soup. Some people call it a gravy, whatever you want to call it, a sauce
Exactly.
made out of tomato, salt, and onion. Period.
That's it.
Hey,
Simple.
and that thing
Simple
would
does it.
Bang. You know, so what you're describing to me sounds something like it's really close to that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And because I guess
Exactly.
you've mastered it because you've grown up with something similar, and just maybe you've tweaked it a little bit with adding some curry and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you made for them, and it sounds like they enjoyed it.
Yeah, she really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And, she was asking me a lot of questions about my intentions with her son.
What did you say?
And I told her that I wanted to take care of him and I wanted us to keep building our relationship. I mean, what else do you say?
It's a bit of a tricky question to ask a woman, isn't it? Because
It really is.
It really is. There's one thing that Kevin Samuels once said, may his soul rest in peace. And I know he wasn't very popular with certain groups of people, whether it's men or women or whatever. But he said something which I think resonates with what you've just described, where he says, women control access to sex, whereas men control access to relationships. So asking a woman what you want with my son is literally contrary to what he's saying, which is why you had a difficult time responding appropriately to what she was asking you.
And I felt that way too. I kind of was like, well, can we ask your son what his intentions are with me?
Yeah,
Because I think that's more relevant.
Hey, okay. Mm-hmm.
But I then met his father 2 weeks after that. And like the whole point of this is that like his family just grew to love me. And, whether he came down to visit or not, I would just hang out with them every night after work. We would do activities together. It was very much like a natural connection.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, on my end, it wasn't the same because my parents didn't like him at all. So,
where are your parents based, or where were they based during this time? With you or back home?
back home.
Ooh.
Back home. So after we had been dating for a while, I decided, okay, this looks like it could be something serious. And, I've met his whole family, so I want to tell my parents about him. And I had never told my parents about anyone that I have dated before. Like, I've never presented them with a man before. So that kind of tells you that, it just felt like, okay, this is the guy that I am really feeling and I see a future with. But my parents just had questions about our age gap, and also automatically hearing that he was from West Africa. Already there was that, how Zimbabwean parents are not interested in entertaining the idea of their children, marrying into or being partnered up with West African men for the most part.
Yeah, yeah. What was your age gap, by the way?
So he was 7 years older than me.
That's not that bad, though.
Well, coming from a family where, like, my parents were 3 years apart and my sister and her husband were also 3 years apart, I think for them, they just thought, okay, you're still in uni and, you're with someone who is significantly older than you. I think they were just worried about, like, how that could turn into a tricky situation. Okay. In terms of the fact that he's just so far ahead of me. Yeah. Developmentally. So, like, it kind of sucked that they were just not on board. And unfortunately, in navigating that, I would tell him everything. Like every time I had a conversation and my parents reacted negatively, I would also tell him. And so he was very aware that they were not receptive of him. And I don't think that was super helpful for him. But that's important to mention, just because, I think that it builds into the relationship later on as to some of the factors for why it didn't work out. So anyway, him and I planned our first kind of vacation the following year. Around the time it was spring break at uni, and so we got like a week off and we decided to go to Mexico.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, we're going to Cancun. This is kind of my first time traveling, outside of leaving Zim to come to this country, and also small trips to South Africa and things like that. So this is my first time going to like a nice tropical destination, and also my first time traveling with a partner. So I was really interested in seeing how things go, because I feel like when you travel with someone, it really does give you like a greater perspective into the person that you're with. And so we got to Cancun and everything was smooth, we're very adventurous in terms of like trying different activities, trying different food. Until the one day, like we went to the beach and I saw a foam party being advertised. So basically they were just saying like, oh, at 3 p.m. there's going to be DJs, foam, come in your bikinis. Like we're going to turn up. This is going to be, fun. So I'm excited. I'm like, okay, yes, this is fun. Like I'm here for this. And I asked him if he wants to go. And his reaction was something I wasn't expecting at all. Like he kind of just looked at me like, is this girl crazy? And he says, like, why would I want to do something like that? Like, I'm not interested. I came here with my book. I would rather just read, and you can go ahead and do that yourself if you want. So I'm kind of confused, because I'm like, okay, we came here to have fun. And, I can understand that, yes, there's an age difference, but I mean, you don't need to be in your 20s or to be a young flower to be able to enjoy certain things. So he decided like he was going to read his book. He sat on the sidelines and he was kind of watching me while I did my thing, and he was just reading his book. And I think, that one incident then filtered into other things. So we started having disagreements during the trip about what activities we wanted to do together. Because, he was the kind of man who took charge. He's definitely he was a strong leader. And he would kind of just wake up and be like, okay, so this is our itinerary for the day. And I'm also a hard-headed person who is very opinionated. So I would be like, okay, no, this, and this will work for me, but I also want to explore these other things. And so we just could not agree on the things that we wanted to do. And compromise wasn't something that, he seemed too happy doing. So basically this started causing a bit of tension with him and I, and the trip eventually came to an end, and we got back to this country. So I guess it was about a week or two later, that tension had still kind of it still kind of stuck around, even in our conversations when we were talking to each other. I feel like we got back and we were just like, okay, I think we need space from one another. So you go back to your city. I'm going to be on campus doing my thing, and we'll see each other, the next 2 weeks or so. So he hit me up one day and he was just like, okay, I'm coming to see you today. I think, I want us to talk about things, and expect me at this time. So in my head, I'm excited, or I'm thinking that, this is a good man, because he notices that there's tension and he wants us to fix things. So he's not going to do this whole let's talk on the phone thing. He's actually driving 2 hours to come
Yeah.
see me so we can fix things and make things right. Tinto, this man came to my dorm with breakfast and immediately just sat me down and said, we have to break up. Just like that. Like there was no preamble, there was no warning. It was just kind of like, we have to break up. We can't continue doing this. So I'm so confused because, like I said, in my head, I was thinking, okay, we're working through things. This is great. And all of a sudden, this man has dropped this ball on me. So I tried to understand where he was coming from. And he was always someone who tried to, project into the future.
Right.
And he was like, the fact that, you and I we couldn't agree on what our interests are. It just doesn't seem like we're aligned. I think that we should just end things now, quit while we're ahead.
And this is what
before
our
we
interests
get-
were as far as the holiday was concerned, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So his concern was because we just had different interests that, we just weren't compatible enough. And this would filter into our lifestyles in the future. And so he just wanted to end things now before we got involved with each other, like on a deeper level.
How compatible were you sexually?
So honestly, I hadn't had as much experience by the point that I met him. And so I was still very much trying to discover myself. And I thought that the sex was good enough. There were things that, I wanted to try that he was not open to trying, and that he was very rigid about. And there were also times where I would express my needs and they just weren't being met. But that's something that kind of developed like later on in the relationship, more so.
You see, the reason why I asked that question is how you are sexually. Well, let me speak for myself. How I am sexually could be an indication of how I could be with my whole being. So if this guy is rigid about what to do in a sexual environment, which is by far the most vulnerable anybody can be, both a man and a woman. So if you're rigid about something that you could be potentially most vulnerable about, anything that happens outside of that is an extension of that. So if you don't
Right.
have to be rigid about whether you want to get into a swimming pool or not because you're not vulnerable, you're going to say, I ain't doing it. Do you get what I mean? if in the most intimate and vulnerable position you can be, you're rigid, you're fucked. Excuse my French. Because anything else outside of that way you don't need to be rigid about, why should I give two shits?
Exactly right. And I wish someone had told me these things right from the beginning, because I didn't connect those
Yeah.
dots at the time. I didn't connect the dots. I always just thought like, okay, he's in the medical profession. And so because he studies all of these things, like that was kind of always the excuse.
Studied all of these things. What
That was
things?
always the
What
excuse. Like,
things?
oh,
because he studies medicine, he understands biology and levels of horniness and what he can take and what he can't take.
listen.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here.
I'll give you an example because I always laugh when I think about this, but it's like, I really enjoy getting head, and that is one of the easiest ways to like get me there sexually. And this is something that I would express to him because as much as I wasn't experienced, I had, experimented a lot in terms of foreplay when I was with like my high school boyfriend. And so I knew what I liked when it came to foreplay. And that was something that I was very happy and willing to say out loud. But this man would refuse to give head because, he would say things like, it increases the risk of men getting throat cancer.
I thought you'd say that.
Yeah. So he would completely refuse to do that. And on the days that he decided, like, oh, I'm feeling nice, let me actually just give this girl, he would use what do they call it? You know, when you cut open a condom and then you like lay it down on the surface, and he would perform the act with that covering my
What?
areas.
Hold up a second. Literally, hold on. I'm trying to visualize this. I'm quite visual as a person. I've never had to tear up a condom to put it anywhere else other than on my penis, right? So, I don't want you to get too graphic either. So this man, you said he cut up the condom.
Right. He would cut it open, and then he would just lay it down on the area, and that is how he would be, performing the act with something,
So-
a barrier between his.
God damn. Shit.
It's actually, there's a name for it, so it's actually called a dental dam.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well,
this
so why
is,
not just buy a proper regular dental dam instead of having to chop up something? Because if okay, I'm assuming hey, bana, no man.
I don't even know, Tinto. Like, it just wasn't making sense. And, this was...
Did it do what it's supposed to do for you, at least?
It really didn't, because it's just... It's weird. I already felt very self-conscious with that happening, because it almost made me feel like,
Did you at least have the decency to tell him that, hey, I'm not feeling this like this?
It just would cause a lot of arguments whenever I would bring it up and say that, this is something that I need to get there.
Yeah.
It just made us actually get into a tense space.
So you chose peace, pretty much.
I just chose peace, and I would just let it go.
All right, cool.
Right. So back to the point where he broke up with me. I think it was about, 2 weeks later. I had already started processing the breakup, and, I would cry to my friends. I would go meet up with them for lunch and just be bawling my eyes out and being like, I thought that we were going somewhere with this guy. Like, I love his family, all of this stuff. So 2 weeks later, I think he reached out to me just to check in and see how I was doing. And we ended up getting on a call. And, on that call, it almost felt like I was starting to convince him about the positives of our relationship and why we actually worked well together.
Yeah.
Because he would ask questions and I would just be like, no, but I think, we could work, this could really work, because you and I are, we're opposites, but we provide each other balance. I started just like rationalizing those things. And I feel like because he was such a logical person, anytime that you used logical reasoning with him, it actually would work. So we eventually got back together and we said, we're going to try this thing.
Yeah. Oh.
And
okay. He gave into that. He's like, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we got back together and, I eventually graduated, moved to the same city as him, and now we got to start seeing each other more frequently.
Did you move to that city just to be with him?
No, I moved to the city because I got a job there. And also it was just one of the first steps to me leaving that like rural area that I was in and trying to figure out like where my new base would be.
Yeah.
So now that I was in the same city as him, we would see each other more frequently. And, one of the positives of dating a doctor is that there's money there. So we would do a lot of traveling. We would do a lot of like eating out, exploring, and all these exciting things that just kept the relationship feeling fun. So now at this point, the pandemic happens And as you know, there were a lot of restrictions, there were lockdowns on everything. And, we now weren't able to do those things. So going to a restaurant, eating out, like we couldn't do any of that. And we basically just had to spend a lot of time indoors at home. So this is where, like, I guess I noticed a bit of a shift in the relationship where we kind of lost all the excitement of being able to do all these activities and go out. And I think for a lot of people, it was a time of like eye opening, because now you really had to question the quality of the time that you're spending with the person that you're with. So I think it was really here where I started to notice how like rigid he was and so stuck in his ways and just basically inflexible. Because
Are you sure that's where you're really starting to see that? Because you've already seen the signs on holiday.
So I saw the signs, but I think because I was so naive and this was like my first proper relationship, those signs didn't mean much to me. I didn't extrapolate anything from them. I just kind of saw it as, okay, we went on vacation together. He didn't want to go to this beach thing with me and we made it work. We compromised and, it worked out in the end. So things started making more sense now that, we were seeing each other more, and now that we didn't have all those other distractions, in the relationship, and I could focus more on like our characters and our compatibility.
How old was the relationship at this point?
So at this point, it was 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, we had been together for about 2 years.
Okay.
So like just as an example, like I planned a staycation for us because I thought that, okay, we haven't been going out much, but we can still visit a local hotel and just have a fun night together.
Yes, Chima.
Go out to eat, have a meal, and then come up and just play games and like drink, something along those lines. So I booked the hotel. We get some alcohol and like we're just chilling, and it felt so forced when we were in the hotel room. I would be like, okay, let's play a game, and he would not really be interested in playing the game. I'm like, let's put on music, and he'd be like, I don't really like listening to music like that. I would rather listen to a podcast. And another thing is that he didn't really like the fact that I dress a certain way. Like I always like to dress a little bit sexy, If I'm revealing one part of the body, I cover up the others. So it's just subtle sexiness is how I like to describe it. But he was very vocal about the fact that he didn't like me wearing certain things. And so, while we were at the hotel, I got dressed and I wore something that was completely covered up. Like I looked like Michelle Obama that night. And this man just looked at me. He didn't even say anything. He didn't pay me a compliment.
No.
He just, and it was at this point that I was like, okay, so what do you want from me? Because, I'm actually making the effort. I'm trying, and it just doesn't feel like that's being reciprocated. So yeah, over time, I think these things started to compound, and I kind of just got to a point where I was like, okay, I think this relationship might not be the one for me. So before that, however, my dad ended up passing away during this lockdown phase.
Hey, sorry to hear that, man.
And so, thank you. And so, he was there, and he's someone who has also never experienced grief before. And that was my first time experiencing grief. So I had a certain level of like sympathy for the fact that when someone you love is going through grief, you sometimes don't know how to handle it or how to deal with it.
Yeah.
But, to a certain level, he was very robotic about his approach. Like he just didn't know what to do with someone who's crying. He would kind of just sit there and look at me. And then like I would be like, I need hugs. This is what I need from you right now. So I think that also kind of just, it made a bit of that tension grow because I just didn't feel as supported. So anyway, I had a roommate at this point, and I basically started leaning more on her for support. So she would do things like, try to plan date nights for us so that we would have the time to just enjoy each other's company, because she knew that I was like dealing with a lot of like funeral proceedings and also trying to plan a trip home during COVID.
Oh, that must have been a nightmare.
It was terrible. I wasn't actually able to go home, and I had to watch the funeral over WhatsApp, which was just, it didn't feel real at all.
Yeah.
And, he did the best that he could, just providing financially. He would just be like, okay, I know this is going to be an expensive trip. So, here's some money and like, take it and do what you need to do with it. That was kind of the most support that I received from him at the time.
Hate to say this, but he's sounding like those typical men. And I shouldn't say typical men because it's not typical of men to be like this. So I take that back. I have to be careful how I tread these streets, fam. You could get cancelled just like that for saying the wrong thing. Yeah.
But I know exactly what you mean. Like the traditional father figure that we have, accepted as fatherhood in our culture.
Which means provide, and that's in monetary terms, and that's it. In the last 3-4 episodes, I've emphasized an interview, and I'm getting tired of referring to this, and even my reality with my own son speaks the same, that children really don't care what you do financially. They care more about what you do with your time with them.
Exactly.
And in this time of emotional difficulty for you, it didn't matter what this man did for you financially. Well, it did, because it would soften the financial blow, which can be really burdensome if you're dealing with death. But what you needed were his arms to be around you. Just him to hold your hand and just give you a form of peace and comfort to say, hey, I feel what you feel and I'm sorry for what you're going through.
Exactly. And so, it just felt awkward, even like I said, when my roommate would plan certain dates for us, like I would be the one who would be doing most of the talking or trying to like spark conversation, because he just was awkward like that. And when you're going through grief, it's like you want someone else to bear the burden of conversation at the very least. You know what I mean? And that wasn't the case. So it started making me question just a lot of things. And I kind of came to the conclusion that, you know what? I think this guy and I have to break up. So we decided one day to like meet at the park and have a conversation. And I had already pre-planned everything that I was going to say to him, that like I appreciated our relationship and his companionship, but I felt that we were just not on the same page.
Yeah.
And we needed to break up. So I show up to this park and he comes with like a folder of like paper, and I'm like, okay, what's happening here?
Okay.
So before I even got to sit down with him and tell him my thoughts and everything, because I think he had sensed the fact that like, this girl seems to be pulling away.
Yeah.
And we had also had arguments about, the quality of time that we were spending, where I was just saying that like, I just needed more from him and he wasn't giving me that. So he came and he was like, you know what, I've been thinking, and there's a lot that you have been complaining about in the past. And I really sat down and wanted to think about ways that we can fix things. So he pulls out this like business plan for our relationship. You know, it's when I say it was so structured, like he had typed everything out.
What?
He had literally labeled everything, and he was like, okay, activities. I've thought of, activities that we can do during lockdown, even when we're not able to go to restaurants. And you've complained about this in the bedroom, and this is what I plan to fix. This is how I plan to fix it. Like, he literally had everything down to a T, and he had thought about ways to create, ways to create more pockets of time in his day and in his schedule that we could spend together. Like, literally all the things that I had been complaining to him about, he had fully documented in this worksheet of his, and he had a plan for how to fix it.
What?
Your reaction is exactly what my reaction was. I was kind of just like taken aback. But I had also felt like this is too little too late, in the sense that I had already given up. I had already said, this is not for me. I have to ask you to tell me that you love me, because that's also something that he would do. It's like, apart from not complimenting me frequently, he would also just tell me that he loves me maybe twice a week. And when I would ask why, because I'm like, okay, if we love each other, then why can't we just tell each other every day? Or, for a lot of people, even at the end of each call, you're just like, bye, I love you. And that for him was not a thing. He was like, I don't want you to get too accustomed to hearing it because it will lose its meaning. So he would literally ration out the number of times that he would tell me he loves me. And Tinto, when I say I just became used to that, I saw it as normal. I would just tell myself like, yeah, this is fine. I don't need to be told that I'm loved or need to be complimented by my person. Like, I'm fine with that.
But that wasn't true, because throughout this whole conversation, you come across as somebody who really thrives on affection. So touch is important to you.
Right.
And quality time is important to you. And maybe words of affirmation may be important to you.
Very.
So why were you out there rationalizing things that are important to you?
I think it was because, being so young, and like I said, this being my first serious relationship, it just was almost like, oh, okay, so I guess this is the standard. And whenever I would tell other people about some of these things, it's their reactions that would tell me that, like, okay, this isn't actually the norm.
Yeah, it's subpar, yeah.
Because I had just accepted it as like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense why he wouldn't tell me he loves me all the time. Because we're just trying to make sure that those words hold water when we do say them,
Yeah.
But yeah, he had presented this whole plan to me, and I still didn't feel convicted enough that like he was actually going to turn around and become the person that I needed him to be. So we went to sit in his car, and I told him, like, thank you so much for the thought and the effort, but unfortunately, I still think that we are just not meant to be together.
Wow. You were strong enough to say that, yeah?
I was convicted because I think that, even going through my past journal entries, it took me a while to get there. But when I did make up my mind, I was like, no, I'm ready. I had written enough in my journal about the fact that like he just was too inflexible, and he wasn't giving me what I needed. So I tell him this, and then he looks away from me, and it's silence. And then I actually had to turn his face towards me to see what was going on. And he had tears running down his face. And this was the first time I had ever seen this man cry. And even in previous conversations, when I would ask him like, when was the last time that you cried? He would be like, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something along those lines. And that's not strange for men. I feel like men don't typically release emotions through tears the way that women do, right? But for him in particular, already knowing how stiff of a person he was, like for me to see those tears, I actually felt like that was a breakthrough moment. So I sat there and I was like, okay. And he's now just there like, I really just want to change and make things better so that we can be together, like whatever it takes. I actually sat down and wrote this whole plan because, I want this to work. I want us to work if you just give me another chance. And that was the reason why I decided to stay and continue the relationship. So everything else, I had just been like, nope. But until I saw those tears and I felt like, okay, I've gotten through to the real human in you. I'm not talking to a robot anymore. I'm actually talking to a person. That was what made me decide to stay. So shortly after this, my lease was coming to an end. And my roommate was telling me that, okay, I'm going to move in with my boyfriend now. So you either need to find a new roommate or find a 1-bedroom apartment. And so at this juncture, I kind of presented that to him, and he just proposed, like, why don't we actually move in together?
Mad. I was hoping you wouldn't say that, but here we are.
Here we are. He had a condo that he was renting out to some people, and then he lived in another apartment himself. So, he kind of said, okay, my tenants are moving out of the condo and I plan to like move in and stay there for a while, because he was always planning to leave this city. And so he figured like he would just move into the condo until the point that he left the city, and would probably sell that condo.
Yeah.
So essentially, he was like, yeah, we can move in together. And then if we want to, we can even get our own separate apartment and start afresh together on a new page. My lease ran out, and I just like packed up my little furniture because of the fact that, my roommate and I had bought furniture together. We kind of just sold everything, and him and I then moved in together into his condo. So we started staying together at his condo, and in the meantime, we were looking for a new apartment to move in together so that we would have more space, because we wanted a 2-bedroom so we could have an office and a bedroom. And we would just, especially where I was working from home, I needed an office, and where he was going to be studying a lot, that was a top priority for us. So he's getting the condo prepped for sale, and, I'm helping out where I can. We find a 2-bedroom just down the street from where his condo was, actually. So it was super convenient. And then we moved into our new place together. So obviously, with African parents, you cannot,
you cannot announce that this is what we're doing.
The fact that you are going to move in with who? So, it was fine, because when I have video calls, I would just sit in my little one corner, and that's all that my mom would see. That's all that she would see. But, she was also talking about plans to come and visit and things like that. So I was just like, you know what, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. But I was able to keep it under wraps in the meantime. So he actually warned me from before we moved in that, this was possibly the worst timing for us to live together, because of the fact that he had some major exams that were coming up that were really going to be occupying his time. But, in my head, I was like, this is actually great because that means that if we live together, I can actually catch more glimpses of you than I would if we lived apart and you're studying so much. Because while you're studying, I can just be in the next room. I can come visit you, a little kiss here and there, and then I leave you to do your thing. So in my head, I was like, no, the opposite is true. We can actually make this work a lot better. So, yeah. We got into summer, and this is when he was really pushing his grind. He was like constantly studying. And I also started finding ways to entertain and distract myself with a lot of different ventures. I started getting into YouTube. I started a business, and I was basically always with my friends. So anything that was happening, I would be outside with my friends, and he would always just be at home studying or working. And I think that time really started to like make us grow apart in the sense that it just felt like we were living two completely separate lives. And even by way of conversation, it's hard to talk about similar things where you guys are both doing very different the activities. From his point, he's just studying, and maybe if he has anything interesting he wants to talk about, it's like a podcast or something new that he discovered from his books. Meanwhile, I'm like going to the club, going to the beach, doing all these dynamic things, and I can't share them. I can't necessarily share them with him because he doesn't have that level of excitement for these things. He's just not in that phase. So it became really challenging where like I was just leaning on my friends more and more for support. Like I was more outside that summer than I've ever been. And I think that, looking back at it, that was just me trying to cope with like my grief, me trying to find ways to just deal with like my new reality, while also knowing that like, okay, my person, he doesn't really know how to handle someone who's grieving on top of the fact that he's always studying or working. So, I mean, at this point in the story, a third character gets introduced.
Male or female?
A female character. Obviously, when I was outside, I would be seeing other men and kind of seeing like, okay, envisioning almost in my head, like, okay, what would it be like if I was with someone who also had the same interests as me and had the same time? But that was never something that I ever acted on because of the fact that I was so invested in like my relationship and making it work, and we had just moved in together and all of that. So this character, we're going to call her Tambudzai because Akati Tambudza, like she became so problematic in our relationship.
Yeah. In fact, for those who listen to this podcast and they don't speak Shona, Tambudzai just means trouble. Something or someone that just gives trouble and problems.
Problems. So while I was still back in uni, he would always tell me about like this couple, like friends that he had, where it was a Zimbabwean girl that was also dating a Western African man. Right. And so he would always bring them up and be like, oh yeah, like once you move to the city, like we'll get to hang out and maybe go on double dates and things like that. So when we moved, I would actually ask him and follow up, because those are things that I enjoy doing, double dates. So I would always be like, so how far with your friend? When can we ever meet them? Like, it would be nice to meet up with them, this and that. So, because it was COVID and I'd finally managed to go home a couple of months after my dad's passing. And I came back safely and had to do all of those like hotel quarantines and things like that. this friend of his, who's also from Zim, apparently had questions about the process for me because her mom was trying to go back home and they kind of wanted to know what things to look out for, right? So he tells me this, and then he's like, yeah, she's asking questions through me, but I think it might be easier if I give her your number and you guys can communicate. So I was very open because I was like, yeah, I've heard about this girl so many times. So not a problem. Let's put me in touch with her. So I message her on WhatsApp. Her and I start talking. She asks, all the questions that she has. I even say like, let's get on a call if it makes it easier. So we chatted over the phone, and I'm a very like conversational person. So I was just like, yeah, the good robot told me about like you and your partner, and it would be great if we could actually meet up one day and hang out. And so she's like, yeah, for sure. Like, let's go for breakfast this weekend if you guys are free. And I was like, okay, instantly, like, let's do it. So we agree on a spot to meet at, a date, a time, and then we go on this breakfast date. So him and I get there, and we find Tambudzai sitting alone. So I was like, obviously a bit puzzled, but I went with the flow. I sat next to her. We did intros again, like, oh, nice to meet you in person finally, what are you up to, this and that. And at the time, like, she was studying for a law degree. So we talked about all of that, and in passing, I just happened to ask her, I was like, oh, so when was the last time you and Good Robot hung out? Because in my head, I'm assuming that this is a reunion.
Yeah.
That, like, because he's been talking about these people and they haven't ever come up in conversation apart from me asking when we're going to hang out. I'm like, okay, we're finally hanging out, so you guys probably haven't seen each other in a couple of years. Why did this girl say, oh, last week? Literally, last week. And I was like, huh?
What?
She's like, oh yeah, we went for a coffee at Starbucks, this and that. So I actually saw him last week. So thank God I have a very strong poker face, because I didn't react in that moment, but I kept a pin in that because I was like so confused about the fact that him and I lived together. And at no point did he mention going for a coffee with
Isn't it
Tambudzai.
scary though?
Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, if it was something that was innocent, an innocent coffee, you would just mention it in passing, like, oh, after work, I just passed through Starbucks, hung out with Tambudzai, and, that's it. But that didn't happen. And so I automatically now had my guard up. And, I asked her a little bit about her relationship. I didn't want to seem like I was prying, but I found out that her and her boyfriend were actually doing long distance. So she said that they had been together for 6 years at that point, but he lived in a city that is a 2-hour flight from where we live. So I left it at that. I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to ask him about this when we get home.
So what? She had made the effort to come and see him on the 2-hour flight?
No. So
because they had met up for last week. Where did they meet up?
No, so she lives in the city that we live in.
Oh, okay.
It's her boyfriend who lives a 2-hour flight away.
My bad. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Yes. So, that was kind of how the conversation went, and we said our goodbyes, and then later that day, I went to him and I was like, okay, so the two of you met up for coffee, but why did this not come up in conversation? And he just goes, oh, I didn't even think it was significant. Like, we just met up briefly and like we talked about some books that we were both reading, and that was it.
That's not the question. Why didn't this come up?
Exactly.
Why are you telling me all this other stuff? I didn't ask that.
Exactly. I thought that it was really strange, and I let him know. I was like, I think that is something that you could have easily just said to me, and I wouldn't have thought anything of it. But the fact that you decided, to keep it hush hush, makes me suspicious. So I didn't give him too much to work with. I kind of just kept my cards in my pocket because I wanted to do a bit of like investigating and see for myself what was going on. So, I just let that one slide. And then, now I kind of knew what to look for. So, in general, we had access to each other's phones, right?
What do you mean in general? You said that so generally. What do you mean in general?
In general, we had each other's passwords. And he had expressed that he was uncomfortable with me going through his phone and his private. He was a very private person. But we did have each other's passwords. So I obviously decide I'm not someone who likes to just creep through people's phones for no reason. But because I now have this inkling that there's something going on, I must now find out what's happening. So he was one of those people who would just leave his phone lying around anyway. And that's the kind of relationship we had. Like it inspired a lot of trust in me because I'm like, okay, he's never, just always holding on to his phone. His phone is always just around. If I need anything, I can just open it. Right. So I start, kind of looking through their messages and just trying to see if there's anything there. And mostly what I saw from the conversations was that they were talking about politics and social topics and issues.
Same shit you were talking about with him right at the beginning.
This is true. This is very true. So she also seemed to be someone who enjoyed reading a lot. Obviously, she's doing law. And so she would kind of ask him a lot of interesting, just social type of questions and try to get his perspective. And, I saw that and I had a bit more peace of mind, but I still didn't necessarily fully relax. I didn't fully relax.
So sorry to do that, but listen, yeah. If you have a guy in the house who's been really quiet about meeting up with another woman for coffee and only mentions it upon request, and then when you go through the chats, it's about generic content. If there's no bigger red flag than this, then I don't know what it is.
Is it a red flag?
100%. Because the gathering of the two is secret, but then the conversation is public. Because the conversation is the decoy.
Right.
To say, we talk about general stuff. So if it's general stuff, then the meeting should be general and the meeting should be public and known.
Correct.
So why is one more secret than the other?
I honestly couldn't piece it together. I couldn't understand why he would feel the need to hide that, especially where
especially since in the phone he's not trying to hide the conversation, right? See now why I'm saying that there's no bigger red flag than that. The phone is your access to a lot of stuff, and if conversations are generic with someone that you're suspicious of, you're fucked. Excuse my French. That's just been my experience. And let me be quick to put that as a disclaimer. Where a conversation in a phone is generic and your suspicions about something, just leave. because there's other stuff happening in the background that you will never be privy to.
Yeah.
Which are phone calls happening with erased records.
Yeah.
Text messages happening with erased records.
That's true.
The only thing that's really bugging me in this whole situation is how they met up and you were clueless.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So we had a very open style of communication. And another thing is, if she was working on any of her assignments, she would also poke at his brain about certain of those topics that she was looking at. because he was like a walking dictionary, like very smart, very knowledgeable, and I could understand why someone would want to like reference him a little bit because he just knew a lot about a lot.
My nigga, there's Google for that. That's no excuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, trust me, we will get there. So homegirl, it now would get to a point where it's like a Friday night, and then homegirl is sending him voice notes, asking him questions about like her assignment or like just trying to get his perspective. And, he would actually play them out loud. He would ask me, okay, what do you think about this? I would give him my take, and then he would give his take. Tinto, the cartoons.
Anyway, go
The
on.
cartoons. So we would both give our takes. He would respond, and then, I would later also go through those messages and just review them again myself for peace of mind. And then I would be like, okay, this is fine. However, there was a point where these questions stopped being just about, assignment related issues, and now they became more personal. So, one thing that I noticed now that her and I had exchanged numbers is that I could not change my profile picture or change my status without her, going goo goo gaga over anything that I put out there. As soon as I uploaded something, she would be going crazy, like, "Oh my gosh, girl, fire emoji, you are so beautiful. You're so beautiful. The good robot is so lucky to have you. Look at your legs, look at your body, like you're such a bombshell." And when I say it was every single time I dropped a picture or anything, to the point where I would even start feeling pressure myself. Whenever she would now post something, I would now have to be like, okay, I have to return the favor and compliment her as well. So we went through this phase of just like back and forth compliments on each other. And then one day I posted something on my story because I had just gotten a tattoo done. Every time I go home, I've just decided I always want to get a tattoo done. And then I come back and, I add it to my collection. So I had just gotten a fresh tattoo done. And I think I posted a picture that either showed the new tattoo, just because of the positioning of the picture, or I was either just trying to just be like, oh, fresh tattoo, fresh ink type of vibes. So I posted that to my story, and then I think she did come in as usual with the heart eyes and all of that. But when I then went to the conversation that she was having with the good robot, she now was asking him, so what is your perspective on tattoos?
Ay, casi.
And meanwhile, the good robot was a very conservative man. Like you've already picked up on. He didn't like the fact that I would wear revealing clothing. He didn't like the fact that I got tattoos. Like he kind of made peace with it because he figured that I was going to do what I'm going to do. But he didn't like that. So, he just says that in the chat. He's like, I'm personally not a fan of them. If I want something that badly, I'll just get it put on a necklace, and that's what I'll do. She now responds and she's like, yeah, same here. I also don't like tattoos. I don't feel like they are very Christian-like.
And then she just paid you a compliment about your own tattoo.
Exactly.
Mad thing.
So at this point, I'm just like, this girl is not serious because she's coming to me in my face with all these huge compliments, but then now she's underhandedly going and like backchatting those same things with my man. It's one thing to have your opinion, but also it almost felt like she was now handing her resume over to him as per, okay, look at me versus what you currently have, and you pick.
So what was she like? Was she pretty? Was she attractive? In your opinion?
She
and you're not just hating, are you?
I'm not. I honestly had to send her picture to a couple of my friends and be like, please, y'all rate this girl, because if I do, I don't know that I will be fair. So I just noticed that the conversations were starting to go more in that direction, where she would now be asking him things about like submission, what his opinion is on those types of relationship style things. And my issue with that was the fact that these are very sensitive topics that are very particular to people who are in a relationship. And him and I were still trying to figure out our footing and our balance in terms of like, I am a headstrong woman, and things like submission, we really have to talk about what it is that I'm submitting to, and your method of getting me to submit. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I became very uncomfortable with where these conversations were going. But I didn't have a way of even voicing this because, again, I'm going through his chats in secret. So, I mean, I started just trying to figure out ways to communicate this to him, to let him know that like he needs to set certain boundaries. So I would say things like, oh, I was listening to a podcast and one of the viewers wrote in, saying that they found that their person was having chats with their friends about certain topics that are uncomfortable. What do you think about this?
Mm.
And I would get his take, and then I would clearly outline and say, I feel like certain topics like submission should not be discussed with friends because it's irrelevant.
Mm.
It needs to be discussed between two partners so they can figure out their balance. So I would say things like that, or I would say, oh, I had a dream that, this is what was happening, and I would use those methods of trying to communicate with him that I was uncomfortable with what was going on.
Mm.
So in this time, like I became somewhat of like a psycho detective in the sense that like I felt like I had to monitor his phone like every day. And so I would be waiting until this man has fallen asleep to be able to like read and figure out what was going on. And the one day we were coming into a long weekend, and she had been pushing to meet up with him and saying like, oh, let's study together. Like, do you want to study together? This and that. So I saw that chat, and immediately I was like, I need to put a stop to this. I cannot let this girl meet up with my man again, because what are they meeting up to do and to talk about?
Mm.
So, when we were having a basic conversation, I just mentioned that I made it very clear that I would actually be uncomfortable if he went to meet up with Tambudzai without me being there.
Mm.
Because here's the thing. I had made every effort to invite this girl to hang out with the both of us. And every time I would invite her, she would have an excuse as to why she couldn't come.
Oh.
So, for example, around his birthday, I was planning to have his friends over for dinner. I had gotten this really big cake, and I wanted to celebrate. And she was one of the first people that I reached out to.
And she said, nah, I got something.
And she said she would be unavailable. She would be studying.
Mad.
The following weekend, we were going on a hike, and she had told me that she loves going on hikes. I invited her on a hike, and
nothing.
She said no, she couldn't make it. But here she was pushing to try to meet with him so they can study together alone.
Bloody hell, man.
So I had been inviting her, and she continuously was declining my invitations. And yet here she was trying to meet up with him outside of, the two of us. And so I made it clear to him, without saying that I had seen any chats or seen any notes. I just said like, you know what? I feel like if you and Tambudzai are to hang out, let it be in the presence of both of us. Let's all hang out together. That would just be my preference. And I left it there. But the day came, and, this man told me, okay, I'm going to study today. And he left and he went to meet up with her.
So did you ask who are you studying with, or?
So I had already seen the chats from the night before because at this point, he now used to keep his phone with him all the time. So he would go to the bathroom.
Mad.
He would go to the bathroom and he would have his phone in there with him. He's going to shower, he has it. Like he stopped leaving his phone laying around as much. And in the moments that I could steal the phone at night, that's how I found out that they were still planning to meet up. So I let him go. I let him do his thing. And when he came back, I even asked him questions, just open questions like, oh, so how was the library? Who was there? Was there anyone there with you? Just very plain questions, but I already knew what I needed to know.
And what did
And
man say?
he flat out lied and said, yeah, I just studied alone. And that was it. So um, I obviously got very upset. And, the next day I let him go to work and I left the apartment. I went and got a bottle of wine and just hung out with my friends until he came home and found no one was home. And I just texted him, I'll come home when you're ready to tell me the truth.
Mm-mm.
So he eventually pleads with me to come back home so we can talk about this. And this is when he actually breaks down and he tells me, like, I'm so sorry. I met up with this girl to study. All we did was study. I didn't want to tell you, and like it's been eating me up all day. Like I didn't even have a good day at work because of the fact that I lied to you.
I don't buy that shit. You know the one line that I think is full of shit is I was going to tell you.
Literally.
Yeah, and that's what he's hitting you with now.
Literally. And he just was like, I feel so terrible about the fact that I lied to you, and I'm not sure, what it is about this girl in particular that makes me not be honest or would make me do things like this.
Says a man who came with a business plan about all the things he needs to get out of here, man. Okay, anyway, yes, continue.
So, I mean, it really took so much to actually work through that whole situation because at the time I was even going to therapy and my therapist had no idea that I was experiencing grief because all we would talk about for literally the 8 weeks that I was there was this girl and my relationship because that's how bothersome it was.
Damn.
And how much it actually put a strain on our relationship. And so, in many ways, like that whole situation was just mishandled. And I'm not one to tell someone who to be friends with and who not to be friends with. But clearly, this girl was like a threat because, if she's making you act out of character, making you sneak out and do things, then there has to be some sort of interest there. And I wanted him to be able to be honest about that and acknowledge it. So without getting into it too much,
Yeah.
like eventually he ended up cutting her off so that we could try to like work on repairing our trust. And I think that had just taken up too much strain on top of the fact that we just were living completely different lifestyles, and it felt like we were just going down two different pathways. We were not on the same page. And even in observing his parents' relationship, I could draw similarities in the sense that, like I said, his mom and I were very similar, and him and his dad were also very similar. And when I looked at his parents' relationship, his mom would always be traveling by herself or doing things with friends because her husband is always working. He was always grinding or reading. He would be up at 5 a.m. just to read before he goes to work. And so I just looked at that and I said, this is the path that we're seemingly heading down, where I'm just going to be hanging out with my friends all the time because my person doesn't have time for me.
Yeah.
And so the day that we finally did break up, we had already booked flights to go home to each other's countries because we had been seriously talking about marriage. At this point, we were going on 4 years of being together.
Sure.
And part of that process that's important for me is meeting the extended family, is also going to see where your person grew up and just trying to kind of understand where they are coming from and what made them who they are today. So we had already booked those flights and we were literally a month away from our travel date. My mom was ready, she had made the guest room ready. And we actually sat down and we said, okay, if we're going to do this trip, because of the significance that it holds, we actually need to be certain about what it is that we're doing here. So are you fully in this? Are you fully invested? And, where are we at in terms of like our relationship and where do we want to be? And we both basically came to the conclusion that the relationship wasn't where we wanted it to be. And there were things that I needed that he wasn't able to provide. And there were things that he needed that I also wasn't able to provide. And as far as compromising or making efforts to change those things, we were at least very honest with each other about the fact that, okay, I'm a social butterfly. I'm not going to stop, being out there or interested in certain activities just for this relationship. And he too said he wasn't willing to make lifestyle changes to adjust for the relationship. And so we shook hands and we said, okay, I guess this relationship is over.
What a mature way of dealing with this.
It was too mature, Tinto. It was it was so confusing how we literally shook hands and we knew that okay, I guess this is the end of the relationship. And, we lived together for another month after the breakup while I figured out a place to move into. And yeah, that was the end of that relationship.
Damn.
So no drama, no nothing, but we just found that we were just two completely different people. And, where I had been convincing myself, convincing him of the fact that our differences gave us balance, the proof is in the pudding, in the fact that we just could not see eye to eye on a lot of things.
I'm really happy that this has such a mature end to it, because a lot of what doesn't happen, I think, especially with people now because of cancel culture, is taking that step back to reflect and just recognizing where you may have been at fault and where he may have been at fault, bringing that to the fore and then say, this is not the path that we have both grown in. It's not the same. Let's leave it here.
Yeah.
And it feels like that's exactly what you guys did. And I'm just playing back your lessons as I'm reflecting on this, because you said, yes, opposites attract. Yes, you are opposite. He wanted to do his podcast and draw up business plans on how the relationship should work out. And you wanted to be a little sexy. You wanted to have fun. You wanted to enjoy the phone party. You just wanted to have fun. And you wanted the relationship to be fun. This is not to say that you just wanted to be out there and make yourself out. You really wanted to work and make it fun. Think about the time you wanted to go to the relationship and play games and do fun things with just the two of you.
Yeah.
You were opposites. You were attracted. But, he wanted somebody that he just wanted to sit down and talk about politics and social stuff, which he had done with you. And it's probably the thing that he got attracted to the most. But then when they go behind your back and they're talking about how tattoos are a bit, ungodly, not Christian-like, and a bit tacky, then is that whole thing about birds of a feather that do flock together.
Right.
So I get that very, very clear. That came out really, really well. to say that yes, you guys are opposites, but then him and Tambudzai were birds of a feather, and they were kind of flocking together. They were moving together in the same direction.
Exactly. And also they seemed more compatible than anything.
Then when you're also married to what his dad was like, birds of a feather flock together. And what his mom was like, busy hanging out with her friends and not really doing fun stuff with dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then doctors should date other doctors, and medical professionals should date each other. Is that because you feel that they would have had a similar mindset?
That was more because the time demands of that profession require someone who actually is in that profession as well, so that you guys are on the same page, same rhythm, same flow.
Yeah. Totally get that. And then pay attention to the little details from the beginning. Man, the detail I would have paid attention to from day one was how in the bed he's a little rigid. Hey man, there's two ways to approach it. You might want to approach it and say, look, I could try and help break that barrier, but to try and fix someone from being rigid to less rigid. I was trying to find a clever word, but my English bundles ran out. It makes a lot of sense. And then habits, character traits, and behavior patterns always reveals a lot about somebody's lifestyle. You couldn't have said that any better in terms of what he wanted and what you wanted. And then last but not least, never just you or alter your needs to meet the definition of what somebody else wants in you. Couldn't be more right. It's nice that you are at the age that you are very clear what you want out of life. And he was at an age that he wants exactly the same. And the nice thing is you guys came together and said, we want very different things, and you shook hands and you left.
That's right.
So in a way, you've done yourself a favor. And also in the same breath, given where you are now, you're now in a position to call out stuff that comes out real soon and say, I'm not going to have a repeat of that.
Exactly.
Because you've come from the angle of being naive, which is how you described yourself, kind of going into the deep end with somebody who doesn't really negotiate or want to compromise. And now you have a feel and a sense of what you want. So now literally your next relationship, if you're not in one now, can be dictated and tailored to exactly what you want because you've been on both extremes. The naive side and the one where you felt out of control because you're dealing with somebody who just won't bend their back backwards.
That's true.
Well, thanks for sharing your story with me, Chima. Appreciate this.
Thank you for having me, Tinto. It was finally great to also be a part of this amazing podcast. I've been listening to you for a couple of months now, and every episode has just been amazing.
Thank you so much, and I'm confident your contribution is going to be amazing and helpful for somebody else.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to another episode of The Feeling Station. I'm your host, Tinto, and I will catch you in next weekend's episode. Peace.
Tell me what you're feeling.
Satis on Daru Raini and Chake Zaini.
Tell me what you're feeling. Now that it's over.
Satis on Daru Raini and Chake Zaini.
Let me talk about my feelings. Let me talk about my feelings, yeah.
Urudoi motoru no to kujiziru amai.
Kujiziru amai. Love is a fire.
Urudoi motoru no to kujiziru amai.